Well, hello and welcome to Beyond Belief Sobriety. This is a podcast where we explore issues of interest to people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. If you are new to our podcast, we post an audio episode pretty much every week, and we've been doing that since September of 2015. In addition to that, I'll post a video of the podcast episode on YouTube when it's okay with the guest. In addition to that, my co-host Angela and I will do a live stream every Friday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central here on YouTube and also on our Facebook page and our secret or private Facebook group. So you're welcome to participate in those live streams. They're a lot of fun. It's kind of like a meeting / party. And every Friday we take a look at another topic. What I'm doing here is I'm going to post this live stream that we did on Friday, April the 30th, as an audio podcast. And I'm doing that because I was told that the audio wasn't so great when we posted this live. So it's also a pretty good episode. We're taking a look at the power of the group, and it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of interaction from people in the chat room and Facebook and YouTube. And it was just a really great podcast. And we were using a super book too, the Alternative 12-Step book. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. Without further ado, this is it, The Power of the Group. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Friday live stream. It's good to be here for another Friday. And we're going to have an interesting topic, I think, taken from the Alternative 12 Steps book, where we're going to be talking about the power of the group, and specifically the power of 12-step groups, which are unique in a lot of different ways. But before we get started and before we start saying hello to all of you, let's see how Angela's doing over there. Angela, how are you?
I'm doing okay today. You know, I had an exciting thing today. I went to a thrift store for the first time in over a year.
Oh,
yeah, it was pretty exciting. We still wear masks. We have a city ordinance, and so and social distancing and all that. But I am fully immunized now, and so there's a statistical less likely chance of me dying of COVID now. And so I went, and one of the workers there was putting some stuff on one of the racks and asked me, if I was finding everything okay, which was a strange question. I don't think I've been asked that in a thrift store before. Because it's like, what if I said, I'm looking for galoshes, could she say aisle 3? No. So anyway, but, I haven't talked to many people in a while, or made social chit chat. And so I'm like, okay, maybe this is what we do now. And so I said, I haven't been here in over a year, so this is kind of nice. And she said, yeah, it was nice for us too. And I wasn't sure with that question if it was, it was nice for us too that you haven't been here in over a year. Like, do they have a picture of me in the back that's like, watch out for this lady? Or if she was trying to say, that having, more people come in, or if they really just preferred, not having people come in. I don't know. It was really awkward. And so, I did not miss having awkward conversations with strangers. That's for sure. So I'll have to get used to that again and start putting together a repertoire of things that I can say when stuff gets awkward. But
I know, when we first started social distancing, the joke that a lot of us would tell is, I've been social distancing all my life. And in a way, I kind of have, but
right.
And it was I think it was kind of nice not having to put myself in those uncomfortable situations of having to make small talk with people and so forth. But then again, I was missing the challenge and the growth that comes from overcoming all that. But
right.
Saturday, I went to a party at my in-laws house, and
Okay.
we all were immunized, and we were all together in one place without masks. And it felt so weird. And at one point, Susan's dad sits down in the couch right next to me. And I'm like, wait a second, you should be somewhere else. You shouldn't be, you're supposed to be 6 feet away. So it's really weird to get used to that. Anyway,
it'll be an adjustment.
It will
period.
be.
Yeah. So, Josie has an announcement announcement. Do you want
Okay,
to read that?
I will. We have already 18 people here. That's amazing. Thank you,
Nice. Good to
everybody.
see you, everyone.
Yes, thank you for supporting this live stream. We wouldn't do this probably if there was nobody listening. So thank you so much. So Joe's announcement. Speaking of groups, the Rainham Agnostic Atheist and Freethinkers Group of London hosts the International Secular AA meeting on Sunday. Oh, that's right. This Sunday, London Calling, 8 p.m. in the UK, 3 on Eastern time zone, noon in the Western time zone, Pacific time zone. Good. That's good to know. Maybe I'll try to do that. Tomorrow, is that tomorrow? It's Sunday. Okay, Sunday. Our group in KC is going to start meeting again. And that's another wild thing. Anyway, I guess it's going to start tomorrow. I kind of dropped the ball. I didn't get a hold of the guy at the church soon enough to do our training. He wanted to do training beforehand. But I'm just going to show up tomorrow before the meeting and see if we can get in. We'll see what happens. So,
okay.
Yeah. So
need not be organized. So.
Right.
That's not what it means. If anyone's listening, I know that that's not what it means, but that's just what I like to say when stuff like that happens. So
yeah, the group will get to know the post-COVID John who doesn't like doing anything anymore. So.
Oh, that's not true. You still do a lot.
All right, let's get into it. So what we thought we would do, it's a short chapter, and we thought we would just kind of do what we've done before and just screen share the chapter, go through it, stop and discuss different parts of it. And we welcome your contribution to the topic by commenting in the chat, the live chat in YouTube and Facebook, and also by calling our toll-free number, which I will now scroll and put here on the screen there. It's 844-899-8278. And I'm paying attention to see if anybody calls in, so you won't be waiting that long. Let me go ahead and get the screen share thing started here, and we'll get going. And I guess you guys can see that. It looks pretty small
we can
from mine.
See you too.
Oh, do you really see me? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You see you too, but we only see our figures there. Let me change that.
The little avatar.
There we go. All right.
Well, it was so small, I couldn't tell if it was actually you talking or just the photo of you. That's awesome.
I hope those of you that are out there in YouTube land and Facebook land can actually see a larger version of this. I think you can, because if I blow up my screen, I can see it good. Okay, very good. I'm just looking at a very tiny version. So anyway, this is all about the power of the group. And when I was reading this chapter, I thought, wow, there's some really good stuff in here. So I think a lot of it I may have already known and appreciated, but it was just kind of good to kind of refresh it in my brain and realize, wow, this is really a cool thing that we've got going here, and it is kind of unique, compared to other kind of groups that might be meeting. So that being said, I guess I'll start reading, and then Angela, I'll let you take over at some point if you can see the screen. Are you able to see the screen?
I can see it okay, but I also have the book in front of me. So
oh, good. There you go. You have an actual paper book. Cool.
Yeah. It's got pages, and you flip them, and it kind of has a smell.
So here we go. Groups, shared energy for growth. 12-step groups support us in our recovery. In them, we identify with others who have problems similar to ours. We come together to share our common solution, the working of the steps. We meet to talk, to gather insight and courage, and to share our experiences. 12-step groups are a different kind of group. The method of a 12-step group is not the same as the method of a typical support group or therapy group. In a 12-step group, each person works a self-directed program. There is no facilitator or professional leader. Members of the group focus on the process of the steps and their own recovery. The relationship among members is respectful, caring, and impartial. Group members support each other as each person works to apply the 12 steps to his or her life. In contrast, support groups often resemble informal social groups and may or may not have a professional leader. Participants are likely to be actively involved with each other and with the group process. They talk about their current and past lives, with feedback being an important part of the interaction. Therapy groups are always led by a professional. Members work on their own issues with the involved support of other group members. The experience is often emotionally intense because the objective of therapy is to work with profound and powerful feelings. Some 12-step members go to support or therapy groups. Either can complement but not replace the 12-step group experience. Well, Angela, would you have any comments about that little section?
Yeah, I like how they differentiated between the different types of groups. That's one of the things that I do appreciate about 12-step groups. The way that we talk and we learn to share from our own experience and any of the topics, how we've either encountered it or worked on it or whatever. But, it's nice to share it in that way because I have attended therapy groups and other types of support groups. And I think they do have their place and can be more effective for some people than others. I find, like I said, this to be effective because people can't argue with me about what my experience is, whereas in some of the some of the therapy groups sometimes that's part of the process is other people calling you on stuff. And, they do it in a group setting and it's usually, part of what they're supposed to be doing. One of my friends had multiple DUIs and had to attend some classes and some therapy groups for that. And that was part of their process is that a new person would come in and have to sit in the middle of the room and they would all basically interrogate the person on why they were there and then, pretty much confront them on anything that sounded like the person was lying or being dishonest to themselves or whatever. And I think that would be hard for me, particularly newly in recovery. I don't know that I would have handled that very well, but sometimes those people don't have a choice because the higher power is usually the government of some source insisting that they be there. So for me, the 12-step group process, I enjoy that more than the other groups that I've been involved with or heard of. How about you?
The same feeling. It's more, it's informal. What I really liked and what I highlighted in there is that it's self-directed, that each, that there's no facilitator or leader, that each person works their own program. And some of us individually might forget that and think that we need to let each other know what we should be doing. But for the most part, no, each person is free to do their own thing. It's self-directed. And I think the idea of not having a person who's like in charge or who facilitates or runs things works really well. I think that it works well in other type of groups where they have that too, but it's really nice to be able to have like an informal gathering where we all meet as equals and just share our own experience, not trying to fix one another or be fixed by each other. It's just a unique, it's kind of a unique thing. It's been unique in my experience anyway. So
yeah. Well, you just had a training on different things. One of the questions I had in this section was, how would you characterize SMART recovery? Because it does have a trained facilitator. I mean, I don't think they go through intensive training, but there's a trained facilitator, and then the other group members. I don't think from what I've heard about it, they don't they don't give each other feedback, or do they?
They do in SMART.
Okay, so would you consider that more of a therapy group than a support group?
It's interesting. It's kind of a combination of the two because the facilitator really isn't a therapist, not like trained therapist or anything. They've just gone through training that SMART provides, so they're definitely a peer. But every SMART group does have a therapist behind them if there's a need, that kind of supports them. But they're not, that therapist is not on hand at the meeting. The meeting is just run by the facilitator and the people there. So yeah, it's like that, and it works well, for those people. But I've been told that sometimes the SMART meeting that you go to, if you like it or not, is really going to depend upon that facilitator. I mean, that facilitator has a really important role because that's the person who really sets the tone for the meeting. Whereas at an AA group or an NA group or any 12-step group that doesn't have that sort of structure, the group itself, a group of people, sets the tone. And that's what's so interesting too about AA. It's so hard to define AA because it depends on what meeting you go to on what day and who's there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, and just, what's been mentioned, thus far, one of the things that these authors say, is that group members support each other as each other works to apply the 12 steps to his or her life. And, I guess that's kind of the idea of it. But, we know, particularly from all of the various secular meetings, that, some people do steps, some people don't. And so it's even a little bit more than how it could be, defined a little more traditionally. So
I was going to say that in this book, they talk a lot about the steps, because this book is about the steps.
Exactly.
That's why.
I guess that's where they got that.
But so, because some people are going to say, no, I don't have anything to do with the steps. And that's fine if you don't, because every person has a right to do whatever they want, to define those steps or not to define those steps in any way they want to. But yeah, this book was specifically about the steps and for people who want to work the steps. So they're incorporated into this quite a bit.
Yes, Anchor, they talk about that in this chapter a little bit. He was asking, most AA meetings have someone chairing the meetings. Isn't that kind of their job to keep the meeting on track? And they talk about that a little bit on meeting guides. But anyway, shall we continue?
We'll continue. I'll let you read this next section if you don't mind. The shared solution.
It's exciting. Okay. That's fine, because that gives you the groups are guided by the 12 traditions.
Oh, boy.
So, anyway, the shared solution is more important than the shared problem. And this is on page 112. 12-step groups often organize around a shared problem. Some of them are Overeaters Anonymous, Emotions Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and Al-Anon for the families of alcoholics. 12-step groups also support adult children of alcoholics and people with chronic illness and disabilities. I haven't heard of that one. Whatever the shared problem of the group, it's the steps that are the focus. The shared problem is only the starting point. This means that as time passes, group members are able to move beyond the problem that they all share and apply the steps to many other areas of their lives. For example, in an AA meeting, recovering alcoholics talk about their struggles with worry, anger, relationships, low self-esteem, compulsive overwork, and other ongoing difficulties. Focusing on the steps, they are slowly able to move beyond their alcoholism and expand the 12-step solution to their other life-diminishing emotions and behaviors. And I love that last part. I had forgotten about it until I read this today, to move beyond their alcoholism and expand the 12-step solution to their other life-diminishing emotions and behaviors. I think I just like the life-diminishing emotions and behaviors. I hadn't heard that or remembered that part of it. And that's such a good term, or a good way for me to think about, my larger recovery and what I'm doing. And I think it's easier than saying, well, not easier to say, but I like the concept more than character defects and shortcomings, that, these behaviors and emotions that I sometimes engage in are life diminishing, that they take away the quality of my life, and they're not kind to my future self. So I really like that.
Yeah. And I know I was thinking it was talking about, in what you just read, it was talking about the importance of talking about other issues after you've gone through the steps and you're drinking, you're pretty much solid in your sobriety now. You're not, you feel comfortable not drinking, but you still have other things to work on. You might be depressed, you might be afraid of this or that, and you have things to talk about. And that's usually, in most meetings, in my opinion, what we kind of do discuss. I mean, there's usually a topic, and we're not talking about our using, but we're talking about what our life issues, right? So anyway, sometimes it seems like that sometimes people kind of lose sight of this, I think, in meetings. I'll give you a little example. I went to a meeting last night, and it was kind of a strange meeting because the meeting was based on one of my podcast episodes, right? So I sat there during the meeting while people were listening to this episode. There were only 6 people there, okay? And it was not a secular meeting, but the the episode they were listening to, the person was an atheist and everything, but they also prayed. I mean, they were they were a spiritual sort of atheist, you know, but they also had a real kind of lax attitude about the steps. I mean, they work the steps, but they don't have them memorized to heart. Blah 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 blah. Okay, and then during the podcast, we talked about depression was one of the topics that we mentioned because she had to deal with that. She had other issues that came to light after she got sober, and so we talked about that. Well, when they were finished listening to the podcast, there were 3 people who didn't like the episode. It was really interesting to be there. Well, you don't like it? And they said they didn't like it because we got off track with talking about things that didn't have to do with sobriety. And like when you guys were talking about depression and all that kind of stuff, they said that didn't really have anything to do. You should have just kept it simple and focused on recovery. And I thought to myself, well, that was a real important part of my recovery. So I don't know. So I think that, I don't know, man. I don't know where that comes from, where they get that idea that you can't talk about something other than alcohol.
Yeah, I think it's, there's a couple of things within AA that they may take a little too literally, or it's something that's talked about here in a lot of the more traditional rooms too. And I kind of stick it with the people that say you can only talk about solution, that if you mention, stuff from your past as an example, that, you're not staying in solution. And so, that wasn't helpful for me, or hasn't been helpful in my recovery, to just stay in solution. If people were doing that when I attended, meetings as a newcomer, I don't know that I would have stayed because I would have just heard, what their lives are like now, and so I wouldn't have been able to identify with them. And so I need to hear, different parts of everyone's stories, when they share, so that I can identify. Because if I can't identify with them, then, why am I there? I need to find a different program or a different ways to access help. That's never been helpful to me, but I have heard it a lot as well, or talking outside. One thing with my home group is that I've only been attending Thursdays mostly, but I've heard about the Tuesday meeting, and I know for the Thursday one, at least for the last 3 weeks, I believe, we've been talking about what would be considered by more traditional groups as outside issues, so mental health or depression, or how some of our difficulties have actually made us better people, contributed to our lives in a positive way, ultimately. And so it's something that we kind of we ignore, I guess, or it's just, the people that attend seem to have a larger view of recovery, and are able to handle that without, going into we can only talk in this way.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Tracy and Anchor and Joe Bob were having an interesting discussion about smart facilitators and whether or not they're peers. And Joe Bob initially said that they aren't peers. I think is what he said. And forgive me if I misread there. And then Tracy said, yeah, but the smart facilitators we go to are peers. It's really interesting because the smart facilitator, I think they are a peer in the sense that they are also a person in recovery. Okay. So they're a person who's also using those tools that they're bringing to the meeting. So in that sense, they are a peer, but they also have a different role than the other people in the meeting because they have to facilitate that meeting. And if they recognize that there's someone, like when they go do their check-in, if they recognize that there's someone who's having a problem, they will, and not just the facilitator, but the entire group will kind of help that person through it, but the facilitator being the guide. So it's like the facilitator is a peer, but does have a different role. And that role is kind of one to lead and guide that meeting, It's really different. It's really different in AA in that way. one thing that I really want to do, and I'm going to try to make time to do, is attend more SMART meetings, because I do want to learn about it. I mean, I went through the training and everything, but I've been to very few SMART meetings, but I do find it very interesting. I like the tools, and I want to know more about it. I want to actually have the experience of attending those meetings and so forth, and I just have not made time to do that. But there's a guy that I interviewed who's a SMART facilitator, and we'll be posting his episode in a couple of weeks. But he is from St. Louis, and he does a meeting in Kansas City. And so I'm going to try to have him on the podcast more often and learn more about SMART. So I find it really interesting, that whole dynamic of the facilitator and how they do things, because, man, totally different than what we do in AA. So anyway, that was really interesting conversation you guys had there. And I hope I didn't completely ruin it with my pontificating, but yeah, that was really interesting. Then Bobbert points out that there's usually somebody that will shout outside issues because they don't really understand tradition 10, and we will be getting into traditions here pretty soon. Bonda Jones, shared energy for growth. You have mentioned previously of being kind to my future self, which I loved hearing and have adapted into my life. And my future self keeps thinking my past self. That is the power of sharing the group, hearing what you need to hear, sharing what might help someone else. Yeah. And Anchor says, that's a little messed up, Bob. I think it's something else they talked to. Something else is messed up. Anyway.
Yeah.
The messed up. What's messed up is the outside issues thing. And Joe Bob says, good point, Bobbert. In my experience, nearly no one knows what the 10th tradition says. They confuse and conflate traditions 10 and 5. 5 confines AA's primary purpose. Okay.
Right. Well, that's a good segue into this next part.
Into my favorite topic, the traditions. Yeah. And again, I do like the traditions. I'm not opposed to the traditions. I do them. I think they're okay. I think they're great for AA. Super for AA. AA should definitely do the traditions. It's a great way for AA to operate. But I don't want to operate myself that way all the time. Anyway, here we go. Groups are guided by the 12 traditions. The 12 traditions are to the health of the group what the 12 steps are to an individual's recovery. They were adapted by AA's first international convention in 1950. Following are shortened and paraphrased versions of the 12 traditions. Now, I will say this. This is kind of good to read these, because I thought these were actually pretty well written. I haven't seen too many interpretations of the traditions, secular interpretations. I've seen a few out there, but this one I thought was really actually pretty good. So I'll just go ahead and read them. So the first tradition is common welfare comes first. Personal recovery depends on group unity. Stay together, guys. Otherwise, if all we do is fight and argue, we're not going to stay sober. Group conscience is the group's authority. Decisions are arrived at by group conscience. Minority ideas get thoughtful attention. Leaders themselves are no authority; they are trusted servants. I like that. It doesn't the actual tradition say something about our only leader is God or something like that? Yeah. Or God as He expresses Himself in our group conscience. Right. Yeah. And I've had people say you can't be an AA group if you don't have God expressing Himself. But then other people point out, but it says God may. He may not. Okay. Anyway,
may not. Yep.
The only requirement for membership is to show up at a meeting. Now that is interesting. Just show up at a meeting. It doesn't say you have to have.
You have to honestly show up.
Yeah. You have to honestly show up. There are no membership requirements, no rules, and no dues. I do like that, though. Just show up at the damn meeting. That's all you need to do. Okay.
Yeah, because how do you determine if someone's honest, has an honest desire to stop drinking? I think most of us, if we were fully honest, we didn't have a desire to stop drinking. We had a desire to, flee consequences, so. I
think I told you once that I really regret the time when I asked somebody, a newcomer, do you have a desire to stop drinking? Jesus fucking Christ. Fortunately, I did not drive that guy away from meetings. He kept coming back, and he became a happy member of our group. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I had that funny incident I think I've shared before where I had a sponsee who was celebrating an anniversary, and they attend different meetings. It was one of the ones that is a God person. And she shared something along the lines like that of that, and then I met my sponsor, and all she asked was if I had an honest desire to stop drinking. And I'm like, I have never asked anybody that in my life,
Yeah.
So I have no idea where that came from. I think it was just, the parroting that sometimes happens, and that I did too. I didn't, use that, but I did parrot early on when I think about it, about, you have to do the steps, or, you need to go to meetings, I was much more towing the line of, what other people were saying as far as the process of AA, the steps in recovery. And now I'm reasonably laxed about that as well.
Yeah, I've changed a lot with that way with myself too. So yeah, it's funny to look at your old self and say, oh my God, that was really embarrassing. but that's what we are. And they even talk about that here, how you go through different phases of development, which is really nice.
Yeah. And I think if somebody even listened to the steps that you and I did together, those podcast episodes, I think we're, in a different place now on some of those. We if we did it again, it would be different, than, what we did. And that was just 3 years ago now, or something like that.
Yep.
So
yeah, constantly evolving. And that's what keeps it fresh. And that's what keeps it interesting. Number 4, each group is autonomous. Its only responsibility is to work with the steps and to follow the 12 traditions. Each group has one purpose: to be a support for recovering people. Groups never endorse, finance, or associate with outside related enterprises. There must be a clear boundary between 12-step groups and programs such as treatment facilities, counseling services, workshops, support groups, and so on. It's not affiliated with the jail. It's not affiliated with the courts.
Yeah.
It's not all of that kind of stuff.
Well, technically it still is in many places.
Yeah.
But it's not supposed to.
Not supposed to be. No. Yeah. And Paula says, is the group actually responsible? No, it isn't, Paula. It's just that this book is about working the steps, and I think that's why they talk about it. It's not, the group's purpose isn't really about working the steps. Not AA groups anyway. 7. Every group is fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. This keeps groups independent. Non-members may not donate money, goods, or meeting space. A collection taken at meetings pay for rent and supplies, which I think is smart. Groups are non-professional. Service to the group is voluntary, or is volunteer and done without pay. Organization within a group and among groups is kept to a minimum. That's interesting, the way to put that. Organization within a group and among groups is kept to a minimum. Yeah, that's probably true with most groups, and it probably is smart too.
I think maybe the standardization may have been a better term for what they're talking about on 9, I think. But anyway, yeah.
Groups have no opinion on outside issues. This neutrality on all issues keeps groups from being drawn into public controversy. And another thing, I'm just thinking to myself, it does say groups have no opinion on outside issues. It doesn't say I don't have an opinion on an outside issue. but it is a kind of a good principle. Hey, don't bring other crap into the meeting. That's not what we're about. Public relations policy is based on attracting members to the program rather than on promoting it. Members' anonymity is always maintained in the public eye and in the media for public relations purposes. Anonymity is the foundation of all the traditions. Groups are guided by the principles of the steps, not by personalities. I do like the way that's worded too. That you're guided by the principles that we're trying to practice and not personalities of the people. Oh boy, comments, anybody want to call in about that? And Joe Bob did answer Paula's question. No, Paula, the author's personal interpretations are not opinions. Yeah, that's true. It's a book about the steps. That's why they're always mentioned there. And it's there, and you're right, it's the author's opinion.
Yeah. And part of the title is a secular guide to recovery. So again, it's a guide. It's, nothing in here is scripture. So, all right. Well, we can move on then. A simple meeting format and guidelines for talking and listening. And so this is, their interpretation or their experience of what that would be. The format is the basic structure of a meeting. It lets us know what to expect and when to expect it. Once a simple structure is established, anyone can step into the role of temporary leader. The leader keeps the meeting within the format, but has no other role. The treasurer pays the rent and buys supplies for the group. Everyone shares responsibility. Members gladly take turns at service positions and other group duties. That's a bit of a stretch, but yeah, that's the idea. The real business of the meeting is the mutual identification and support among members. Following is a commonly used meeting format that makes good use of limited time. The guidelines for small group sharing ensure equality, respect, and safety for all. One, the leader opens the meeting on time, and the affirmation of serenity is recited in some cases. So 5 to 10 minutes are taken for self-introductions, to greet newcomers, to read the 12 steps, to take care of group business, and for announcements. A donation is passed or posted in the comment section on Zoom. A sign-up sheet for speaking at meetings may also be passed. And so, yeah, at larger meetings, I guess that's how they do it. I've never attended a meeting where you had to do a sign-up sheet.
Back in the old days, when I first started out, our group used to do that. The P3, the group I went to, they used to pass around a pad of paper. And I don't know why we did this, but we all signed in. And they saved these things going back to years. So it was like, you could go back to 1968 and find out who was at a particular meeting. It was
weird.
Weird.
Okay. Number 3, the person who has previously signed up for the meeting gives a short informal talk. The focus is usually one of the steps. We talk about the realities of our actions, thoughts, and emotions, and about how we are using the particular step in our lives and how our own 12-step program is helping us. Speaking at a meeting is an opportunity for growth. The only feedback the speaker gets is a hearty thank you by the leader. And number 4, before the meeting breaks into smaller groups, the leader may read the statement. And, this isn't something that that's been read at any of the ones that but I do recall, I think, hearing something similar to that in Alateen when I was younger. And so it might be more on the family side. But the views heard in this meeting are those of the speaker. We each interpret and work the 12 steps in our own way. In your small group, everyone will have a chance to speak without interruption. When people speak, we do not give feedback unless requested. We do not give advice. We take what we want from the meetings and leave the rest. So that might be helpful to add these days, because sometimes that isn't how things go, and sometimes advice giving is presented. So, okay. And number 5, the remainder of the time is spent in small groups where all members have the opportunity to talk and to hear what others have to say. And so, I didn't experience that. Most of the meetings that I've attended in this area don't break out into smaller sessions. I do recall in the 80s, though, like I said, in Alateen, I think that some of the Al-Anon groups did that. My mom was a part of that stuff. And so I recall, some of her meetings being a little bit more in that process. And in Fight Club, which is a very accurate representation of life, I think. But yeah, it appeared that a lot of their group sessions were held like that. The meeting format that we use is somewhat, we, at least how it's changed to Zoom, and some of it was, very similar before, but we do have somebody, and we've played with this over the years, but the chairperson, reads the format or boilerplate or whatever, you want to call it. And they're the one that kind of guides, the meeting, and oftentimes either calls on people to share if nobody is sharing, or picks some sort of a format for sharing. So popcorn has been popular as of late, where, someone shares and then they pick somebody else to share and such. And so it kind of bounces around like that. But, we've tried all different types of formats as far as sharing. And it's sometimes fun to to change that up a little bit. Sometimes, when we were in person, we just kind of like go around the room. It just depended on how many people we had at the meeting, on how we would do that. But like I said, there is no sign-up sheet for doing that. I suppose in some of the larger meetings now on Zoom, when you raise your hand, that's kind of like a similar idea. You need to raise your hand in order to be called on to speak. And Oh My God does that. The main ones I attend are smaller, and so we haven't had to do that too much. How about you?
Well, Anchor has an interesting comment, and I never thought about this, that they do have people sign up at his group because they're going to use it for contact tracing if it's necessary. So isn't that interesting? So if you're meeting in person, hey, everybody, we want to know who's here because if there's a COVID outbreak, we'd like to start tracing. And very interesting.
I know that at least one group, a women's group in Boise, had started to implement that before the meeting locations went into lockdown and everything, and that at one of the meetings I attended for that group, when they started doing that, there were a couple of people who refused to sign that. And so, that was interesting as well. It's like, well, if you don't have compliance, then, how are you going to be able to do that? And fortunately, I guess, for them, lockdown did happen. And so they didn't have to address that. But I'm glad that Anchor brought it up because, that's something that people need to consider, that if they're planning to do that and somebody doesn't, sign in, then, how are they going to handle that? So,
Same.
Yeah.
Boy, I know our group is going to have a lot to talk about now that we're getting back together again. It's so weird to have this thing of getting back together. And then this pandemic is not over by a long shot. But so many of us are immunized now, which gives us a little bit of freedom, So
in the U.S. because I know that in Canada it's not quite the same either, and that there are restrictions on. I think they call it moving from either health districts or something like that, and that John and I, well, not you, John, but my John, have a kiddo in the Portland, Oregon area, and that they're having by county now either tougher restrictions, or they're dividing them into critical and stuff on the number of cases, because they're going up again and having problems. So I think that many of our areas will start to experience that again too. So
yeah. About the groups breaking up in smaller groups, that was pretty common. Now when I like my first 3-5 years, I guess, in the program, I did go to a lot of different groups. And at that time, there were some large groups. The South Kansas City group was large. The Unity group was large, and a group, you guys, you don't know, these names mean nothing to you, but there were a few larger groups, and they would break up in maybe 2 meetings usually. And but that I haven't seen that lately. I mean, I haven't seen that prior to COVID, over the last few years, but I haven't been attending those meetings as regularly as I used to. So I don't know. So it used to be fairly common. But anyway, back to this thing. This is just a general, I think that this is like a good way that a meeting could operate. It's just basically a suggestion or something like that. But I think the bottom line is that that it's just a very simple format. I mean, you can do whatever you want to, that's the beauty about AA is like we always joke, a resentment and a coffee pot is all you need, right? But it's basically just 2 people that want to get together and help each other. You can do whatever the hell you want to and call yourself an AA group and run your meeting however you want to.
Yeah, and like the one you said you attended, was it last night? That I think I saw that one in our Facebook group. Is it that they use different podcasts and things as a way for a group topic? Yeah, and so I mean, can you imagine? Even prior to this, that would have been kind of an odd group out,
Yeah, it would
an
have
unusual
been.
group.
It would
And
have
now
been.
it's like, oh yeah, that seems like a good idea. Why not? So yeah, we have a lot of comments going on here. So
Yeah, Paula says her group, a large group, had the mask going on. A few folks wouldn't wear
mask
them.
war. Mm-hmm.
Oh, a mask war. Mask war.
Yeah,
That's not good.
yeah. And Joe says Toronto's having their asses kicked in wave
Oh
3.
shit. I'm
So
sorry,
yeah,
Joe.
that's a bummer.
I tell you, this thing
Yeah,
is rough, and God, what's happening in India is just unbelievably
yeah, sad,
horrifying. Yeah,
super sad.
yeah.
So, and Jackie's asking, did you contact
I
Fred?
didn't.
Were
I'm
you
so
able to?
sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh my
Okay, we're
God.
all holding you
I
accountable.
know.
I'll
You know,
I'll
I'm
check
like,
on you
I'm
this week.
the guy who never does what he says he's going to do anymore. I'm just so, oh God.
It's okay. It's
I
okay.
know. Okay.
Be kind to yourself.
Do
But I will
contact
check on
tracing for
you.
Fred. Okay. And Bobbert says in the 80s, breaking up to smaller groups was popular. I had a conversation with our central office years ago, the director of the office, and she'd been around for a long time. And we were talking about changes that we've seen in AA over time. And she says the one thing that she noticed is that there are more groups, but smaller groups. And I think that's true because when I was first starting, there weren't as many groups, but there were a lot more larger groups and some really big groups. And I think that it has changed a little bit. And maybe that's what you're noticing, Bobbert, is, you know, that you're seeing less of that maybe. Or maybe you're just seeing big groups that just hanging out together. So I don't know.
I think it took me a while to figure out that there is a difference between a group and a meeting. And that, yeah, you know, some groups can have multiple meetings and stuff. So yeah, so I think, and I still probably refer to them almost in the same way, you know, just without thinking about it sometimes. So.
Yeah, you know, a group. This is how, and it's different from different places. Like I know in California, they don't necessarily. Okay, maybe in different places in California, but I've talked to people like in Los Angeles, and they always call their meetings. They call it meetings. I have a meeting, and the meeting might even have a GSR. Whereas around here, the group has a GSR, and it's the group that participates in the service structure. But like in this Los Angeles, this person I'm talking in Los Angeles, they said that over there they have meetings, and they don't. Yeah. What are you talking about group? I don't know what you're talking about. So right. it is kind of different.
Right.
All right. Here's the. Yeah. I like this section here. We'll move on. Shall we move on?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So group process is how we talk and listen. I really like this section, and we actually did a live stream on this once. 12-step groups must model health for the members. It is important that we don't engage in the same behavior we are trying to recover from. Without the use of clear guidelines, we are apt to lapse into old familiar patterns, and the group may collapse under the weight of our combined confusion, anger, and hurt. Groups function well or poorly because of something called group process. Group process is simply how we talk and how we listen. When we take our turn to talk, we remember that our responsibility is to ourselves, not to other group members. Using the 12 steps as a guide, we talk about what we need to talk about. We talk about how we understand the particular step being discussed and how we are using it in our current lives. We talk about a problem, our feelings, our actions, and reactions. We talk about the new life options created by working the steps and the additional problems our new options are creating. We don't. That's interesting. I
love that. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever heard that in a meeting before, but it's true, right? You know, yeah, people don't talk about how, you know, recovering causes, more problems.
Yeah, it does. It can actually new problems, new kinds of problems. We don't need to have others agree with us or understand us. I like that. And it's very true. In fact, we don't even need to completely understand what we're saying ourselves. Confusion and strong feelings are always at home in meetings. They are a good sign that changes are happening. The understanding comes later as we continue to make progress in our program. When others talk, we support, accept, and love them by practicing large spiritual listening. We put our own opinions, ideas, and judgments aside. We listen with an open and relaxed acceptance of the person speaking and of what is being said. We don't evaluate or judge. Non-acceptance and judgment are the results of narrow, shallow listening. We know that any opinion we form is likely to apply only to ourselves. Large listening is called detached listening because it is detached from the personal limitations of our emotions, judgments, and evaluations. Detached listening is an expression of spirituality and trust. When we listen with an open acceptance and non-evaluation, the speaker feels heard because the speaker is heard. Being heard and accepted without correction is something most of us have never experienced. The circle of safety created by respectful, emotionally neutral listeners enables us to say whatever we need or want to say without fear of being put on the spot or fear of censure. Having others listen with an open, relaxed, and neutral acceptance is a vote of confidence in our ability to work things out. Smiles and a few kind words provide human connection, warmth, and caring. I really like that.
Yeah, that's so good, isn't it?
It really is good.
Yeah, I wrote down again that non-acceptance and judgment are the results of narrow, shallow listening, and that large listening is detached because it is detached from personal limitations of our emotions, judgments, and evaluations. I think that's such a good way to think about it and to phrase it. And one that I wouldn't have really thought of, because usually detached listening sounds, negative, like you don't care or something. When somebody is detached, that's generally, what comes to mind for me, at least. But I love the idea that the detached listening is detaching from, the personal limitations of our emotions, judgments, and evaluations. And it's a great way to think of it. I think some people might say, it's the ego, or letting go of the ego. And I think this is a kinder way to say it, even though it's applying to basically the same thing, that, we try to get, outside of our own judgments and personality, and just, be open. So I think it's an excellent piece of writing, and in way to think about, what our role is at meetings. Sometimes you'll hear that we're just there for the newcomer, and I think to myself that, well, yes, that's an important reason why we're there, but I'm not just there for that, because my recovery isn't just about helping other people. It's a big part of it, but that's one area of it. And I think that when I've, felt the most balanced in my recovery is when I've been able to stay within the space they're talking about here of being detached, from, what my judgments and ideas and emotions are about what other people are either saying or doing or not doing, or, all of that stuff. When I'm able to just be present and listen and stuff, that those are some of the times in my life where I've felt what some people would say, spiritually well, but I generally say I feel balanced and yeah.
And I like the idea, and it's true, that when I'm listening to somebody, I'm taking what they're saying and I'm applying it to myself. And I'm doing that. I'm not doing it consciously. It's just what I'm doing. And I learned that in AA. I'm not looking at the person and judging them by what they're saying, but I'm thinking about how it applies to me. And sometimes it might not apply. Now, do I judge people when they're talking? Sure, I do. But that's just that's human nature. That does happen. But hopefully, they're not seeing that expression on my face when they're talking.
Yeah. That's part of the problem with Zoom, is that somebody is always seeing your face usually. But it's true.
Yeah.
It is. We do well. I think part of that is, one of the sayings that gets passed around a lot is to listen for the similarities. And I think that's really what, we're probably doing. And so, not just if it pertains to me or not, but just what is the similarity in, what they're sharing. Do I have experience in some way with that in my recovery or not? And that is really, really helpful, particularly if you're, you're a secular person and you can't get to, secular meetings. Now it's not as much of a problem, but, prior to the pandemic, it really was. And so I, had people that couldn't make it to our meeting. So I would attend other meetings with them so they'd feel like they had, a secular buddy, at least at that meeting. And I would, usually suggest meetings where I knew the people there that, may have been more traditional in their AA program, but that I knew were really open-minded. And oftentimes, I'd leave the meeting feeling like, yeah, that was a good meeting. And one of these people would leave going, oh, they got it all over the place. And I, and the difference was that, when I hear people talking, usually in a meeting, I listen for, what they're actually doing. And so what I would hear is, or what someone might say is that, I was struggling. And so I got down on my knees and prayed, and and then I went for a walk, and then, I did yoga. And what I'd hear is that, I went for a walk and I did yoga and those types of things, and the other person just heard that, that they turned it over to God. And so, so listening to similarities and being able to, really it's empathy. I would guess, that going into the meeting and trying to, be empathetic is helpful, because I think sometimes we do get a little bit jaded, or we can, if you've attended, meetings for 25 years, and heard it all, it might be a little bit difficult to continue to be, like, where's the similarities? But, if you're at least trying to be empathetic and, and remember, when you've felt the way the person is feeling, regardless of what the circumstance is, then I think it's helpful. What does Anchor say? Do you think it's acceptable to walk out of a meeting if you don't like or agree with what you are hearing? Because I am guilty of that. Yeah, I think sometimes, it really depends on the meeting and what's going on. I'm trying to think of when I've walked out of meetings.
I've been walked out on before a couple times.
Yeah.
And I tell you, the one time it happened, I deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
I deserved it. It was at the Live and Let Live group, and I was a new.
And you
I
were
was
not
a newly
living and let living.
I was a newly minted atheist in AA, and I had written, I swear to freaking God, like a 4 or 5 page manifesto. Yes, it was awful. And I read that at this speaker meeting, and it was more like a revolutionary idea for AA or something, and it was awful. Anyway, one guy walked out on me, and at the time I was like really upset that he walked out on me, but now like I realize, and it's like, you know what, I don't blame the guy for walking out on me. But then another time I was at a group, and there were like it was like 3:00 in the morning or something like that. I was doing an alkathon, and there were only 2 people in the room, and one of them walked out. It's like kind of weird, but anyway. But I think I've probably walked out on meetings. I don't know if I've done a speaker meeting where it was like really obvious where, when I walk out, where it's going to be noticed or anything. But I've left meetings that I just didn't feel comfortable at, or that were good for me or whatever. So I think it's okay. You need to do what you need to do. Joe says he sits in a different room.
Yeah, I don't think that. I'm trying to think of, there's been many a meeting that I felt like I needed a meeting, needed to go to another meeting because that meeting was so difficult or dysfunctional or whatever else, but I don't know that I've actually, walked out on any because of the discussion or something. And, I don't know that anybody's walked out on me speaking. I think most people who probably would generally stick around so that they can, try to figure out a way to argue with me afterwards. But in general, no, I don't think that anyone's walked out that I'm aware of. So,
and you never know too, when someone walks out, maybe they just need to go to the bathroom. Maybe they have.
It's true.
Maybe they just have an appointment. Or they get something else they got to do.
Yeah.
So,
who knows? Could be performing brain surgery. Yeah. Please do. Bomb squad. Expert. Yeah. Go do your job. So.
Yeah. So I think the consensus is yes, it's okay if you need to go. You need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's 7 o'clock.
I know. Do you think it's okay if we go
Yeah.
over a little bit? Because we don't have
What do
that
people
much.
say?
I think.
Yeah, I think it's good.
All right, we'll do it because I don't. We don't have that much further to go, and the rest of it, like I like the way it finishes up where it talks about how to know what a good healthy group is.
Yeah,
So,
sounds good.
Angela, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. The look and the feel of a supportive group. We want our groups to support our growth and self acceptance, personal change, and happiness. Some groups do better at this than others. They are made up of people, and people are anything but perfect. So most groups are a mixed bag of dependable support and little irritations. Sometimes big irritations, but irritations. The following are some positive things to look for. 1, the group is open. Newcomers are immediately welcomed and included. This is one of the best indicators of a supportive group. 2, the group feels like a safe place. We feel an emotional comfort within the group. 3, group members share laughter, many smiles, and sometimes tears. The emotions expressed are genuine and natural. 4, people are free to be as open or as private as they choose. Respect for privacy is crucial. There is no probing. 5, the group makes good use of time.
Mm-hmm. And that's where we were talking about earlier about the chair of the meeting has that responsibility to make sure things move, and that is not always easy to do.
No, it's not. Yeah. And sometimes the additional group members need to help with that as well. There have been times where somebody is either, going off for an extra long time, or they are getting off topic in a difficult space. And so sometimes our group members at least would redirect the conversation or interrupt and say, this is actually the topic and it's time for someone, another person to share or something like that. So anyway. Everyone has equal status. Length of time in the group or 12-step program doesn't confer special status or privilege. Dang it. 7, there's a feeling of mutual respect. There is no competition among members. 8, it's not apparent which members have social or other connections outside of the group.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I like the idea, and depending, in some places that's definitely true. I think there's still, we're such judging creatures. I mean, it's part of our survival mechanism that we can tell by how someone's dressed and their demeanor and language. And, if most of their problems are difficulties with, their grad school right. Or, that extra, the additional property in, Cancun, then it's you kind of get, but I like the idea because I do think that's true. 8, it's, 9, when members are having a hard time or making decisions that may sabotage their recovery, the group doesn't interfere. Instead, other members smile and say, keep coming back. They greet returning members warmly. 10, members work an active program in the group. Sometimes this looks like backsliding and confusion. There are no presentations of a polished program. 11, no feedback is given unless it's asked for, and 12, the 12 traditions are honored.
Where the 12 those traditions so important for an AA group. I thought that was great stuff, and it's kind of good to know, especially if you're new, because you go to a lot of different groups, and some groups might not be so healthy. It's possible. But I think most groups probably are. Most of the meetings that you go to are they most of them have these qualities that I've experienced. There's only been a very few that I've been to that seem to stray from this ideal. But for the most part, I do feel that the one thing about an AA meeting, and I'd say this is true for any 12-step meeting, that is really interesting is that all sorts of people, and we were talking about the social status and everything. Sure, you might know that this guy here is the president of some company, right? But he's sitting right next to someone who might be homeless, and they have a common bond. And it's just really interesting to see there are different people in the meeting that you normally wouldn't mix with probably, but you talk to comfortably at a meeting. It's just, that is really interesting. I like that about AA, that because it's free, there's the only price we have to pay is from our drinking and drugging and so forth before we got there. That's the price we pay, Other than that, once we're there, throw in a buck or two, whatever you can, so, and that does equalize things quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think what they talk about with the detached listening and being conscious of that is important too. Because like I said, we actually did have one meeting where like 5 shares in a row were all about grad school. And yeah. And so, we did need to talk about that somebody brought it up at a business meeting on, how, the perception and whether our meeting needed to, keep that in awareness of how we talk about things, because not everybody is in a spot where they're dealing with grad school, and so how can we share our experience in a way that is more accessible to people of all socioeconomic and educational experiences. Yep.
And something unique about 12-step groups and 12-step meetings, no feedback is given unless asked for. Now that's the ideal. That's there are some groups who stray from that, and we call it crosstalk, I guess. But some groups stray from that and they like it that way. That's fine. They have the right to do that. But in most cases, you don't have people giving you feedback, and
not directly, at least. I mean, sometimes we phrase it. Yeah. Sometimes we phrase things that it's going that direction. But again, sometimes we're aware of it. Sometimes we're not, but the idea is there. Yeah.
So, should we just conclude things now? And, should we finish up with this very last section?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So when we each keep coming back, this is kind of good. I mean, I'll read that. Okay. Our group exists to support us in our recovery. Each of us is in charge of our own program, and it's never the job of the group to direct us. We determine our own realities, our own directions, our own needs, and the working of our own solutions. A healthy group will support us no matter what our personal point of view, the issues we face, our personalities, who we are, or what we have done. A healthy group simply helps us use the steps, or not. Because of the practice of large detached listening, we are able to support the recoveries of a wide range of people with differing points of view. Some of us are eccentric. Some of us have painful issues that are difficult to talk about and difficult to hear about. And some of us have checkered histories. I had a checkered history.
Mine was more chess, but yeah.
Detached listening makes it possible for us to support each other when we are following divergent paths. We believe we are each guided by individual inner strength and wisdom. Another person's inner strength and wisdom may look as if it needs some help, but we keep hands off and we practice trusting the spiritual strength of others. As we stay detached, we develop a deep respect and awe for each other's inner spiritual strength and wisdom. We learn to love each other in a large way, a new way that lies beyond personal likes and emotions. Large trust in other people's inner strengths and large listening lead to large love among us. This is the miracle, and it can happen in 12-step group.
Yeah, the miracle of connection. Hallelujah.
The miracle of connection. Yeah. So.
And it's so true. I've had a rough week, and I've had several group members that have gone on walks with me now that we can go on walks, and and it's great because I can tell them all the crazy stuff going on, and they don't judge me or don't think that I'm less of a person or less of an AAer or anything like that. They just listen, and I really appreciate that of my home group. It's definitely a place where I feel like I can be myself, and that's okay.
I'm just still thinking about tomorrow when we're having our new meeting, and it's like, because I've been away from the group pretty much since COVID. And so it's going to be weird getting back and seeing people and meeting people I haven't met before. But I'm looking forward to it. I definitely need it. I definitely need the connection with people. I need the personal connection. It says, we keep coming back. When each of us keep coming back, I've been sober for a long time, and I don't really feel like I'm in any danger of sleeping. Drinking, sleeping. I'm not in any danger of sleeping because I've been drinking coffee all damn day. But anyway, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I just am looking forward to seeing people, but I am a little bit nervous about it too. So I don't know why, but probably just a change.
You could start a support group for going back to
recovery
groups.
Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I sure enjoyed it, and it was really great not listening, but reading what you had to say out there. The comments in the chat have been really, really good. So it's been a great meeting. I really enjoyed it, and thank you, Angela. As always, you did a great job. And what a great book this was. I really did like this chapter.
This is one of my favorite books. So it was pretty cool. All right. Well, till next week. Take care, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week for another live stream. We don't know what we're going to be talking about, but we'll figure it out and let you know. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. That's another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety. Thank you for listening. If you would like to support our podcast with recurring monthly contributions, head on over to patreon.com/beyondbeliefsobriety or become a member of our YouTube channel. If you'd like to make a one-time contribution, then visit our website, beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and click on the donate button. I do appreciate your support. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back again real soon with another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety.